بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So many books right now are being written on the purpose of life. The purpose of life driven. If you do this, you will gain value in your life. So many people are writing about life coaching and so forth. And God is not part of that equation. So at the end of the day, if you're a materialist, a secular materialist, then you will gain lots of benefit from those books. If you are one who recognizes the soul that gives you your life and your consciousness, and you recognize the miracles of the prophets, then you are looking for what comes after death, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, inshallah. So when we talk about the transition, how the Quran moves from subject to subject. So the Holy Quran, as Surah Al-Fatiha, it began and it basically just clarified these concepts, of God and purpose in Surah Al-Fatiha. So you have who is God, how do we relate to Him, and then the most important prayer and supplication, guidance, right? So then Al-Baqarah begins with the guidance. It tells you this is the book that has guidance, and there's no doubt about it, right? And these are the qualities and characteristics of people who truly have guidance. Meaning, here's a gauge, certain characteristics, so you can see if the way you're living is a way of one that is truly guided, right? Then he goes into disbelief. We know what disbelief is. Someone's heart has said, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in a message from God. So therefore, anytime the message of God or the miracles of God from creation or from revelation are coming to them, they're going to be like, what is this? This is some story, this is ridiculous, it's magic. That's going to be their response. It's going to seem unreal, no matter what. Until their heart changes, and then their whole attitude will change, right? Then it goes into a long explanation of the confusing reality of hypocrisy. People who are not sure about faith, people who hide actual disbelief and hatred towards the religion, and they come out with certain aspects of belief and Muslim character and identity, and yet they have a plot against Islam. And then there's the diseases of the heart that make people fluctuate in their faith. So now we're going to talk about, right here, the purpose of life. So these next two verses that we're going to read, they're going to go into the ideal life and give a justification as to the why. See, a lot of times in many religions, and unfortunately in our community, religion is being taught as a set of rules and regulations that you must believe and do because we said so, right? And that's not compelling to a rational, spiritually awakened mind. Someone who's really looking for spirituality wants to understand why, right? Why was I created? What is my purpose? Where am I going? What's the value of my lifestyle, and where do I get my spiritual worth from? So that's what it's going to begin now, engaging us as people for the first time in the Surah Al-Baqarah, encouraging us, why should you believe, right? It describes believers and who they are, disbelievers, hypocrites are all confused and they've got many issues in their heart and the diseases of the heart. So Allah is going to make it easy for us so that we can understand where our lives fit into creation. We are clearly part of creation. Where do I fit in, right? As a conscious, sentient being here, where do I fit in? What's my role? What is my purpose? Okay? First and foremost, Islam is a universal message. It is not for Arabs. It is not for Muslims. It is for everyone. Ya ayyuhan nas. Oh mankind, or dear mankind, right? Why do I say dear mankind? Because He is, out of His compassion, that's why the Quran begins in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. In His love and compassion, He wants you to know how can you know Him and get back to Him as you live your life, right? How can you be close to Him? How can you earn eternal bliss? God is guiding everyone, right? So He says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind. Dear mankind is because in Arabic when you say ya, it can have different connotations. But here it is ta'attuf, right? It is a loving calling to His servants and His beloved creation. So this is used throughout the Quran to make clear points about faith, right? Religion, purpose of life, for anyone, right? So whenever he says Ya ayyuhan nas, it's going to be something that appeals to everyone. If he says Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, many people who do not know much about Islam, who are not Muslims, they will be reading what comes after Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, and they'll think, this is kind of strict, or I don't understand this, or what is this all about? You see what I'm saying? But anytime they read Ya ayyuhan nas, they're going to be like, that makes sense. The average person across the world. So now you get Ya ayyuhan nas, which comes up in various places, or Ya ayyuhal insan, which is very similar, right? Nas is talking to the humanity of all people. Insan is the individual, spiritual introspection of any common person, right? And these verses were mostly revealed in Mecca, when the Quran was intended to be heard by the polytheist vast majority of society. Let's not forget that in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, by the time 13 years has complete and Allah has enabled them to migrate away from this oppressive community, there were not much more than 200 Muslims in a city of thousands, right? They were a very small percentage, very small, smaller than our percentage probably, right? In America, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at least for sure, right? You see? So that was, the Quran was talking to everyone, right? So as we said, it's going to address the human reality and everyone will feel that they can relate. So what would that tell you? If you go through the Quran, through your app, that has the search in it, and you just memorize, in English, all of the verses that say, Ya ayyuhan nas, right? And then when you're talking to the average person and they're asking you something about Islam, you're going to have some very good quality clarity about our religion to communicate to them, and it will be natural to them. It will awaken their natural innate, the fitrah that they have in them. So then it says the first command, "U'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum." Right? So in Arabic, when you say ayn ba dal, the original root of it is a relationship between a master and a servant, right? And what is that? That slave serves his master. That slave knows I'm owned by my master. So I am indebted to the service of my master because that's where all of my food and clothing and everything comes from. So I have to do the jobs that my master has told me to do, right? So that's basically the concept, right? So we often think that ibadah simply just means worship, and then oftentimes the Muslim mindset narrows the whole religion down to how many rak'ahs of prayer and how many Quran pages did we read or memorize, right? Because they think of ibadah, super religious things like prayer, fasting, Quran, right? But serving your Lord, when you say it like that, doesn't that open it up a lot more broadly? You see? Like, there are so many things that we do in our daily life that if we are following His guidance, we are serving our Lord. We are living a godly lifestyle. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why probably service, could be a better translation. But in general, O mankind, worship your Lord who created you and those before you. Right? So, as we said, the word worship, serve the master. For sure, everyone has a master. See, right now, in modern day society, you're being brainwashed that you have freedom, right? No, you don't. There are certain means within so many different societal control and brainwashing mechanisms that we live in that make you a servant to some sort of thing, whether it be the music you listen to, the television you watch, the job you do, the political affiliation you have, right? If you look at these people, right? Democrats and Republicans, for example, right? They believe that that is like some ultimate truth. Like they must, like they owe loyalty to it, right? I mean, even Obama said it whenever he was talking about, it's not just about Democrats and Republicans. Then he made the caveat, and I am a strong, loyal Democrat, right? Like, why do you have to be? right? Why can't you say that I like a lot of the things the Democrats say, so therefore generally I affiliate with them? But there's some things, and there could be some things that probably I think we need to think about, and that I have a different view that we should probably all look into, right? Yeah, so now you don't become a slave, you're someone who's affiliated based upon your own moral prowess, right? So the Muslim is only a slave to whom? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we say subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a reason we say that, right? That means glorified in perfection above all else. That's what that phrase means, right? So that phrase in and of itself is telling us who we're dealing with. Why are we a slave to Him? Because we can trust Him. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Right? We can trust and depend on Him because the heart that is beating in our body was given that message from its Lord. And that's why it continues to beat. Right? Alhamdulillah. So everything that we are and could be and all we have and everything around us came from Him. So when He says do this, we're comfortable that that is the right thing to do. And that is what we need to do. And that is the paradigm that the Muslim wants to get when they're having ubudiyyah lillah. True servitude. It means worldly affiliations do not control my ultimate identity. Yet, we're constantly being brainwashed from some mechanism or another, from materialistic worldly interests that are not from a celestial heavenly source, to have certain convictions that may contradict with this. So what he's saying is, worship your Lord who created you, right? That's why you should worship Him, right? It's not just because you are being told to. That's who you are, His creation, right? And everything you have, all you know, all you can do came from Him, right? And so that's His blessing. So that's why we say, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. So the modern world is in this constant, what you would say, fluctuation about values, right? What do we like? What do we don't like? Because revelation and God being at the center is now being pushed away as a societal concept. You know, most people now are saying, well, whatever people have decided is good. And whatever we're doing and what we got used to and whatever we're inclining to nowadays is good. But that changes. And it has changed, and sometimes it goes from this to that, right? So then, when he says he, right, refers to himself as Lord for the meanings of parental connection. So whenever he says Rabbakum, right? So in Arabic, when you say Rabb, you're giving the meaning of the one who created, the one who takes care of, the one who provides for, the one that gives you the means to grow and develop, right? That's why in Arabic, historically, they call the father Rabbul Bayt, right? So somebody might say, well, are you saying that God is a father? Yes, of course He is in a metaphorical sense, right? Not in a literal sense, because there's nothing like Him and nothing can be having His exact DNA, His exact qualities. We have been blessed with life and everything in it. Like, let me ask you a question, okay? Do you have knowledge? Allah dhu ilm. Allah has knowledge, right? Are you merciful? Yeah, and He's merciful, but it's a very different kind. One is perfect and complete and comprehensive, and the other one is flawed and fluctuating and has its weaknesses, you see? But if you look at all of our, values and qualities that we hold high, those are the Asma Allah al-Husna, right? So, that's what he's giving you, that parental feeling. I'm like a father or a mother taking care of you. The reason why, even though in Old Hebrew it was used, and they never believed in God as a Jewish community, as a father like He will have a literal son. But once the Christian community made this big belief that Jesus is like the literal Son of God, which really means He's God Himself in taking over the throne and these type of beliefs, then that term would be no longer used so that no one else would get this wrong idea. So Rabb is the term. The Lord, the provider, the sustainer, the maintainer. That's what that is. Okay. So, yeah, we have one more of this. We have to truly feel and believe that He's the Master. Like, for example, if we don't read the Quran daily, right? If we don't read at least a page or two of the Quran daily, right? And we know that we are subject to so many influences, so many circumstances and situations in life, right? Are we really taking Him as our Master and His guidance as the manual for life? No, we are not. That's where we start to assess where we stand, right? As believers. How serious am I about my claim to God as my Lord, as my Master, right? If I'm saying that He is my Lord and my Master, then I would take His book as the most important book, and I would make sure that I do read some of it every day so that I'm soaking up His will and guidance for my life, right? So a lot of people say, I want to have spirituality, and then I'll become more religious. It's actually the opposite. It goes the other way around. You see, you engage in a spiritual lifestyle, then you start to feel spirituality more, right? Some people want there to be a mystical, I feel lots of Iman because of something that happened, right? Outside of me. And something that comes from you, right? It's something that your heart, when it inclines to its Lord and you take that step, then He comes steps running towards you in a metaphorical sense, right? And so when you read more Quran for the purpose, not because these are the rules that I should do that because I was born and raised in a Muslim household and I should honor my family religion. If that's the attitude, you're doing culture. If you're like, I want to know Allah. I want to know what He wants for me. I want to get closer to the one that gave me life. If that's your thought, you will soak up, you will grow, you will develop. Because now your attachment is divine. It's not through a worldly means, right? It's directly, which is the intention of having a Quran and having a Salah, that we have a direct connection with our Creator. So He has the right to tell us what to do, right? So we're going to hammer this point because, like for example, I was having a conversation with a college student, and then the college student, he felt he has a gotcha question, right? I guess because I'm John and I'm American and all this, so he's like, so you believe that it would be an ideal way to punish someone who stole something by chopping off their hand? And I said, of course. He looked at me like I was some heathen, barbaric, crazy maniac. And he said, so do you think in America we should do that? I said, as maybe 5-7 million Muslims, around 2% of the country, I'm almost certain that law is not going to change anytime soon, right? And so that's not what my goal is. But if I was in a land where there was a Muslim majority, then yes, of course, that's the way we should do it. And any Muslim who says I'm Muslim and says no, we should not do that, is rejecting a verse of the Quran. That's what they're doing, right? I said, but that's cruel and unusual punishment. And I said, according to whom? Like, which prophet that did miracles said that is cruel and unusual punishment? He said, well, we just know that. I said, no, people have invented this idea. Now let me tell you a very real fact. The prison system in America that we probably don't know much about, there's a few things about it we should know right now. Number one, most of it is privatized, meaning there are corporations that make billions of dollars off of incarcerating people. And so then they encourage courts and judges to make certain rulings on very minor issues that will at least put people in there, even if it's for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And a lot of the petty crimes, they go in and out. And guess what happens? I know this because before I was Muslim, unfortunately, I knew criminals who came in and out of prison. They go into prison, then they meet so-and-so. Oh, I met this dude Tyrone up in the joint, man. We got this plan. We finna run this and that and the other. So now they're talking about some deeper, more intense crime lifestyle that they're going to engage in because they met some other hardened criminal, and there's no system of rehabilitation. It's throw them in there with each other and hopefully you don't get stabbed to death, right? Hopefully you don't get some bad drugs in there because they're all in there. Drugs are in there, right? Hopefully you don't get AIDS because they're doing all kind of other crazy stuff in there while saying they're normal, right? And so that's our prison system. Is that cruel and unusual punishment? Oh, and the tables are turned, right? You see, that's what happens when you really study things, right? So I can tell you, guys I used to know, if he was certain, if I go steal the radio out of this car, or if I go in this house and jack this TV, I'm going to lose my hand? Hell no. I'm not about to do that. You know, I want my hand. I cherish my hand much more than that. You know, I used to know a guy from Jahiliyyah one time. He wasn't able to come up, as it were, to make his money. He was like, you know, I'm fixing to just go in the club and do something wild, and then I'll get thrown in jail, and I'll get a free gym membership. I'm gonna get buff. Every day I get to work out 2-3 times. I'm gonna get free meals all day, right? And so I don't have to worry about bills or anything like that. Because guess who pays for them? Our taxes, right? So there's people that go to jail just because they have nothing else. So when people talk about, oh, our way is better than your way, many cases they don't know the actual reality of their way. They're just this identification of tribalistic, nationalistic things that people think they're serving a master that is of a worldly reality. We serve a master that is divine, perfect, and above reproach. So anything we learn from the Quran, we will automatically know that that is what's best. And when we study it, I've come to find out, you will see that. You will find the truth in it, right? And if there is a debate among scholars, you will see that scholars with deep knowledge who are not being influenced by some sort of ulterior motives other than what's found within the revelation and the teachings, they're coming to those rulings and showing you. But when something's clear-cut, that's what it is. If somebody steals this much, their hand will be removed. We will not say, well, you know, that doesn't sound right. Because people are trying to convince us that that doesn't sound right. Well, basically what you're saying is, I'm not sure is the Quran Allah's words, right? Or you're saying, I don't know if I like Allah, right? You know, if I think He knows what He's talking about. Which would all be kufr, right? Yeah. So now here, whenever it says, He created you and those before you. Why did He say that? Do not live in the shadow of your forefathers. Rise above cultural Islam and embrace true religion. You see, some people read this verse and we're not sure. Why does He say, worship your Lord and who created you and those before you? What does those before you have anything to do with anything? What it is He is your Lord. And remember, the people in Mecca and the people in Medina, they follow tradition, tribal culture, and affiliation, right? So God is saying to them what He said to Abraham and others before, and the Quran mentions this point in many occasions, that people claim, I follow my forefathers, right? And a lot of Muslims feel like, well, I'm from a Muslim country, from a Muslim family, everything we must do is right, because we're called Muslim. No, it's not, because there's an abundance of evidence that it is not, right? That understanding and in practice, there are many issues we need to reassess and look into as Muslims studying the Holy Quran, if that's the right way to go about doing it, or if that's the right attitude, right? So we should not just go along with our forefathers because they're our forefathers, right? We should, the Lord of the forefathers, we should look to please the Lord of the forefathers, the one that created them. Because there's this attitude that those are my elders, right? The elders, they are older, they come before, their wisdom, I'm just a progeny of them. No, brother and sister, you are the product of Allah's creation and His wisdom. First and foremost, above all else, right? And that's where we tie into true religion, embracing religion directly through the Quran and the Sunnah and the scholarly tradition without being, bound by some sort of, tribalistic religiosity. So what does that mean? That means we need to be in a state of spiritual renewal, seeking knowledge, good company, and self-accountability regularly, right? I've whenever I was, I guess, quite a new Muslim here in Tulsa, I sat with some of the brothers that kind of, have a certain angle in Islam. You have different groups of people that have formed a certain focus, a certain priority system, and they're all Muslim, but they have a certain priorities, right? And then when I went to Michigan, same thing. As I went to Egypt, whenever I went to Kuwait, I sat with all the different groups. At the end of the day, guess what I found out? At the end of the day, everybody wants to be the right one. And they totally misuse and abuse and misunderstand a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. That the Christian community has split up into so many sects. And the Jewish community has split up into so many sects. And my community will split up into so many sects. And there's only one of those that will be on the right path. Right? And then there's some difference of authenticity as to the phrase that comes after that. But we know that this is authentic hadith up to this point by all credit. And so what is that? The right path are those that genuinely, sincerely follow these 3 points. They are seeking knowledge from where? Quran and Sunnah and the scholarly tradition. Not narrowly. They want to learn from the other scholars. When somebody says, don't listen to those scholars of Islam, don't read what they say, don't consider what they've taught, that person is limiting your spirituality. Don't accept it. Don't accept it. They're trying to control you. They want Islam to be controlled by people, right? When it's controlled by Allah Azza wa Jalla, right? And you see good company. How do you know good company? They're people who keep up with their prayers. They're people who seek knowledge. They're people who are respectful and humble and treating people in a nice way. They don't judge everybody according to their mentality, and if you don't fit within the way I think and what I want and the way I think it should be, then you're somehow misguided or wrong and all of that. They're open, they're easygoing, they're confident in their connection to Allah, and they're trying to learn every day something new. And they're self-accountable. When somebody says, man, whenever you said that or did that, they're starting to think, okay, how can I fix that? Maybe I should have approached that. Maybe there's something I can learn from this situation, right? If you're having these 3 qualities, then the people cannot misguide you. Because guess what? You are Allah's slave servant at that point. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. What's all this about? See, that's what we said. A lot of people want to listen to a sheikh. They want to listen to something, and then they one time I was in Michigan and the brother told me, Imam, maybe if you give a sermon about this, our iman will just rise. And then we'll do this and that and the other. What I came to find out is a lot of Muslims want entertainment Islam. They want to go to the khutbah and hear a story and be entertained, like, oh wow, it's like Islamic entertainment, right? Then they leave, and very rarely do they ever start praying and fasting and all that just because they heard some cool, amazing story about the history of Islam or something like this. Really where it starts is for you to take that initiative that he just told you to. Become a true, devoted servant of God. Choose that and start to live that way. Then you will get لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That's what he's saying here in the ayah. He's saying, if you say, you know what, I want to serve God, so I'm going to read the Quran, I'm going to read the life of the Prophet, I'm going to read the hadith, and I'm going to change my lifestyle. See, the biggest point to know if you're on the right path is that you change periodically. If you stay stagnant, then you are either ignorant or you are following the forefathers without question, and you're not growing and developing as was intended. When we say Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim 17 times a day at least, why are we doing that if at one point most people are going to be guided and they'll know and they'll figure it out? Psychology tells us around 30 some years old, 27 to 35, right? The person becomes very comfortable in their ways and they're not interested in changing, right? Right now, I'm who I am, that's what I am, that's it. I'm not changing. That's psychology. Islam, when you look at many of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, right? Many of them were older than that. Many people embraced Islam when they were older than that, right? Many of the greatest companions embraced Islam, like Umar and them, when they were older than that, right? And so, the Prophet ﷺ was given this revelation when he was 40, above that. He didn't say, now listen, Jibreel, I'm Muhammad, Ibn Abdullah over here. I'm doing my thing. Why are you trying to mess up my whole program? Right? He was humble. He was asking Khadija, his wife, man, I don't know, this is a deep thing that just happened. What's the situation? Like, he wasn't like arrogant. He was, he was humble. He was reflecting. He was thinking, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you become God conscious. So if you want to have higher spirituality, it's not going to magically appear. You do it. You choose it. You live that way. You start to pray more often. You start to make sure that your knowledge is deeper. You start to take care of those around you and being more helpful to people around you. You start to try to fix whenever there is conflicts between people. You start to become more courageous in standing up for what is right and against what is wrong. You don't be complacent and wayward, right? So it's just many things that will change about your attitude and the way you approach life. Why? Because you're with Allah. You're choosing to be with Allah. And if you do that, you will have taqwa, right? So taqwa, it means obedience. It means protecting your soul. It means living spiritually responsible. It means to be God-fearing, meaning not, a lot of people take the word God-fearing and they take it the wrong way. Allah does not want to throw you in the hellfire. He doesn't, right? By all accounts of the ayahs and the hadith, Allah wants you to go to Jannah, right? But you as a person, as a human being, have said, I want to take the responsibility of consciousness. You said that before you were even born, right? Your nature as a human, all of us. Let me ask any of you a question. Would any of you rather have not been created a human and just rather be a plant who doesn't know that you exist? Which one of you? Raise your hand. None of you, right? That's the proof. Every one of you wanted this. That's why you're here.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. She said sometimes. I'm with you, sister. I feel you on that. MashaAllah. I wish I was still playing. Yeah. SubhanAllah. The humility of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. No, it's true. Sometimes we feel that. But mostly we're pretty engaged, That's why many people fear death, right? Most people, particularly non-believers, like, oh, I want my existence. I want this, right? So, yeah. طيب.
You were saying something about Abu Bakr.
Oh, radiallahu anhu. MashaAllah. Please do that more often. Sometimes it's hard to keep a good train of thought. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, one time he was talking to his companions and he said, I wish I would have just been an animal so I'm not responsible on the Day of Judgment. Right? People are looking at him. Now imagine how comfortable we might be in our spirituality. Like, that's Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. This is someone that he woke up, he's like asking people, is anybody sick? Let's go visit them. Do you know anybody that's poor? I got some here. Take this, some dates I got. Take them. This is his attitude, right? Those people are arguing. Let's go sit down and see if we can make peace between them, right? So, whatever it was, he was always adamant about doing the lofty, high moral virtues, right? And yet he was like, I'm concerned about my soul, right? So is he fearing God or is he fearing those few sins he has?
Few sins.
He's fearing the sins he has. Allah is not after any one of you. He doesn't want you to go to the hellfire. He's not, this attitude that some people have, if you do that, Allah will throw you in the hellfire, right? This is not the right Islam, right? Whenever it says, Bashira wa Nadira, right? That the Prophet ﷺ was sent as a giver of glad tidings and then a warner. Meaning what? You give the glad tidings, right? We're called targhib. You encourage people so that they will embrace faith. And then once somebody's embraced faith and they become serious about it, and then they start to do something that is, now you would say, that's very serious, that's a very serious sin what you're doing. You realize how dangerous that is for your soul? Now that person has embraced faith. They do fear that I will stand on the day of judgment, right? But the person who has not embraced faith, you start telling about hellfire, man, you guys are a harsh religion. You see? And that's not the way it was intended to be. You know the famous ayah, right? Indeed, Allah doesn't change the state of a people until they change themselves. This is what we're dealing with. Okay? Yeah, as a Muslim community, as a nation of believers, we often complain about our situation and blame everyone but ourselves. Right? If we want this great, lofty guidance and all of that, it's a grassroots movement. Because it says ourselves. It doesn't say the self of the individual. It says ourselves, what is within themselves. It's talking about community growth and development. If you have a few people that are doing righteousness, right, and most of them are corrupt, their situation, who leads them, how they're ruled and governed, will be according to the majority. We get what we deserve. So there have been many evidences when Islam was, the Muslim community, the Islamic state, was revered and respected and honored by people across the world. And they said, wow, the Muslim people, those people are serious, right? I was reading that whole book about Adil Bath, The House of Wisdom, when he was a British guy who grew up in the, this is in the 1400s, right? This is before even the founding of America and all of this. No, it was in the 1200s. And so he had heard some of these stories about the Muslims. He'd heard two versions. One is a bunch of barbaric savages. The other one is about these scientifically enlightened, intellectual people that have these amazing new inventions and things in their society that we all here, are way behind them. So he's like, let me go see. And then he spent his whole life. He went to Spain. He went to Baghdad. He lived in the Turkish-controlled Sicily, or what's that? Cyprus. And he lived in all those places for many years, decades. And he wrote this whole memoir about the amazing things I learned. One of the first things he learned, the Arabic language. Why? Because that was the language of the elitist intellectual reality of the day. That was the Muslims, right? I can guarantee you that the scholarship, the influence of Islam at those times was very strong, very positive, very balanced, very the way it was intended. And then we have fallen from that grace. So we have to change ourselves. Change is not easy. But I can tell you it just takes developing a comfort zone that is beyond this world. Right? That's all it really is. I've seen so many people convert to Islam, and I've seen some people who were born Muslim and went through the conversion process because they never really embraced it until one day they really decided, you know what, I'm going to take this thing. And so what it was is they just realized it's not about me, it's not about my nationality, it's not about my ethnicity, it's not about my parents or my family. It's about me and God. That's what it's about. And I want to make sure that when I die, that I'm put into that grave having built a genuine, sincere connection of devotion. And they live that way. And it gets better and better for them. And they feel more and more comfortable. And they keep growing and developing. So now, he's going to give more evidence. I'm telling you to be devoted slave servants to me, he's saying. He says, why? الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ فِرَاشًا. He has made the earth a bed or a resting place for you. Right? So, this is a place that has everything we need for comfort and replenishment. Right? It's in the food, the materials, the resources. Many scholars said this verse, Fakhruddin al-Razi, one of the great scholars, he said, this verse is the biggest proof of God's existence to those who think rationally. Right? Because he said, look, in the time this was being revealed, right? The idea of the earth being a place of comfort, we live here, this is our home, right? So we live here. But the concept of comfort and facilitation, scholars had said that whenever he says سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, he has subjugated to you everything in the heavens and the earth. What he meant was, you will find at your disposal everything you need to reach the highest peaks of human potential, right? So now as we're sitting in this room teaching this class, with this chair and this, sophisticated device of projection with the heating and all of these things, recording it on this thing, right? This is a whole new world. Where did we get all this stuff from? It's in the earth. We didn't just make it in a lab. We pulled all this stuff out of the ground and made it the way we want, right? So that's what they said. The scholars of tafsir, long before all this kind of stuff existed in this sophisticated way, we were being told that this earth has everything we need to fulfill all of our needs to the fullest extent. And there is no end to it. So he's reminding us the source of everything we have, and that he has given everything a system. See, everything has a system that was given to it. And it has a certain functionality, right? When you study the biology and the chemistry of things, you start to see a very organized, structured system of functionality. That each one serves a very specific purpose and has a very interesting influence when coupled with something else, right? This is for sure not the product of a random explosion. For sure. وَالسَّمَاءَ بِنَاءً, and which literally means the sky, a building. Right? Bina is a building. But if you look at the tafsir, many centuries old commentary said this is referring to the protective roof above us, which in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter 21, verse 32, وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقَفًا مَحْفُوظًا, we made the sky above you a protective ceiling, right? In Arabic, in Old Arabic, this is technically a sama. كُلَّمَا عَلَى فوق فَهُوَ sama, right? And if you can kind of look at it and gauge it, then you can call that a sama, right? So this, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when people were looking up at the sky, did they see a protective ceiling? Was that relevant to their reality? That was crazy. Like what protective ceiling? Did any of the companions say, okay, Ya Rasulullah, we love you and everything, you're the messenger. Your Quran here is talking about a protective ceiling. We don't see it. They said, Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. We know it's there. Right? Did they see it yet? We now know there's something called an atmosphere with an ozone layer, that if you study those two concepts, there is, in fact, a very sophisticated protective ceiling for many multifaceted protections, right? From many different ways, right? We're not going to go into all that right now, but that's there. He says, وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ. He sends down rain from the sky, and thus he brings forth the many fruits of vegetation. So what he's saying is, this is a reminder of where the blessings come from, as well as a metaphor of bringing life to death, as well as giving life to a dead heart. In the Quran, when he says, أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, how many times did you hear that? Over 100. This phrase comes up over and over and over. The simple-minded, non-engaged believer will think, Alhamdulillah, we have rain. That is a very simplistic attitude towards it. Our scholars of tafsir have understood it in three ways. The rain is there to bring the fruits and the vegetation that we take. The food we eat and all of that. The animals cannot survive without the bushes and things growing that they eat from, right? Which came from the rain, right? So it's there. But He also uses this in many places of the Quran. He brings up this same point after talking about resurrecting the dead. To let you know, as you watch as it gets into the winter, these trees become skeletons. And then you will watch in the spring and the summer, it will grow right back to its beautiful life. You see this. You see him doing this. Don't doubt it. Right? Because people in Arabia back then, they used to not believe in a resurrection. They said, it's ridiculous. You die, you wither away, you become nothing, that's it. Right? God is saying, no. You watch this resurrection happen every year. So be careful before you reject things that you know already exist.
Also,
And then,
excuse me for the interruption. Also, the rain that comes from clouds is God's work.
yes,
Yes.
the Quran in many places, like 3 or 4 different places, it talks about how He makes clouds and the concept of the precipitation cycle. If you study those verses, there are actual, I have watched with my eyes on, I think it's called scienceislam.com or something like that, a meteorologist who just studied what the Quran was saying about meteorology, and he became Muslim. He was like, this is awesome. I was not really into religion before, now I'm Muslim, right? Just from reading this, right? Very beautiful, sophisticated clarification of the system that he created. And then, like, if you go into Surah Al-Hadid, and he says, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Isn't it time for the believers' hearts to be focused and devoted to their Lord and to respond to the remembrance of God and the revelation that was sent, and don't let their hearts become hardened and they don't have a strong spirituality, right? Then the next verse, what did he say? اعلموا, know أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها, that Allah sends the rain down and brings life to the dead ground. Meaning what? He's doing that to your heart too. All you have to do, what is the rain in this case? Which comes from where? The Holy Quran. You want to lift that heart, read some Quran and then follow. And then that Quran will be lifted. If you're wanting it to magically happen, that something will make you want to practice religion because faith just popped up into you, because it came from some supernatural way, trust me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yahdi may yasha. When it says that, there's a qualification of people who deserve it, right? And it's where the hearts are. That's why the Quran began the way it began, right? See, the hearts who chose it, khatam Allahu ala qulubihim. If they went against it, they said, no, I'm against it. No. But if they chose it, then you'll see the actions that they do. That's the actions they do because they have chosen it, right? That's because they have chosen faith. They're not doubting. La rayba fi, right? Hudan lil muttaqin, right? And this is what they do, right? Because their belief in the unseen, here's what they're doing, right? They're praying, they're this and that and the other. So if you're wanting some mysterious thing to happen, it's not going to happen. You have to choose it, right? It's in your hands. Like, brother, I told him, I said, brother, please quit smoking, man. I know you can do this. And he said, Wallah ud'uli. Pray Allah will fix me. And I said, no, Allah has already said, don't ruin your body. Don't waste your money. Don't smell filthy. He said that. And many times he's talking to you saying, don't smoke. You're smoking. He's not going to stop you from smoking mystically. He's telling you to not smoke. You are responsible for not smoking. He's not going to make you pray. You don't say, brother, pray for me, I'll start praying. No, you need to go pray. That's you. Right? People narrow it down to these ways, One brother said, okay, ya Sheikh, this language is very dangerous. And I said, why? He said, because we all know the hadith of Abi Hurairah, right? The Prophet ﷺ, prayed that Allah guide the mother of Abu Hurairah, and then they went to her immediately thereafter, and she's making ghusl, and she's ready to, I'm asking you all a question. Okay? Did the Prophet ﷺ want anybody to go to the hellfire? فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعُ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُ مُؤْمِنِينَ. Right? The Prophet ﷺ was like deeply depressed and saddened and hoping everybody would believe, and they weren't. If he could just say, Ya Allah, guide all the people, and they would all be guided, do you think he did that? Of course he did that. He was constantly doing that. Some people don't deserve it because their heart doesn't want it. Hurairah had something in her heart. Maybe it was going to click in the future. And the prophetic dua brought it forth. Al-muqaddim wal-mu'akhir. Right? Maybe that happened. The one who can push something back or bring it forward. But it was there in the heart of Hurairah at some point by her own choice. Allah is not puppeteering people. He's not a puppeteer. He's a guide. He guides the hearts that come to him. If the hearts that are close, he puts a veil on it until they choose to change their heart. فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So do not knowingly associate others with God. Why do you think he says knowingly? Because in Islam, intentions are such a paramount concept. This is where we get into the issue of judgmental behavior. When somebody's doing something because, that's the way they were raised and that's all they know, don't come down harsh on them. Be like, brother, you're doing this is wrong, this is kufr, this is bid'ah. Don't do that. They're not intending to do that. They were raised doing that. That's all they know. Right? Easy. Step by step. Work with them. Help them to grow. Intentions are a big deal. Right? It is the number one key factor to do your deeds and words mean anything to Allah. Right? So if you intended to put your devotion and dedication to something that is not divine, then you have brought something to the level of divine that shouldn't be. And that is of the worst sins. O Messenger of Allah, what is the greatest sin? Mu'adh bin Jabal asked the Prophet ﷺ. He said that you would associate others. You associate creation with the Creator, and He's the one who created you. Right? Meaning what? The way we look at things, this is a very good da'wah point. The way we look at our worldview, there is creator and there's creation. Those are separate. They are not directly as an entity part of each other. They are completely separate, completely different. They are intertwined through a mystical connection of creation and inspiration and guidance and knowledge and all of that, mercy and so forth, right? But the divine, there's nothing that could be called divine other than God, and there's nothing that should be worshipped or given the divine right other than Allah. And somebody might say, Alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim. Well, what we were talking about before, if you start saying, okay, I'm going to prefer, I was sitting in a group of people and, we were talking about the seriousness of prayer. And the brother was like, Allah knows what's in my heart. Like, this is a Muslim guy, and this guy was in his late 50s. Been Muslim his whole life, born in a Muslim country. He's like, Allah knows what's in my heart. I'm a good person, right? And so, praying all that 5 times a day, I don't have to do all of that, right? And I said, why? He was like, because that stuff's to make you a better person. So it's really, and I was like, so basically what you're saying is Rasulullah ﷺ was a really bad guy. Because he was praying a lot, right? You see what I'm saying? And he was like, no, but he's just giving an example, right? I was like, well, so when the Quran told all believers to pray at the certain times that they were designated, it says like that in the Quran, right? Then why would we not do that? And so right now he is associating a popular thought which is called secular liberalism, which is the modern religion that's being forced all over the world by globalization, right? He's basically making that's his master. It's defining for him who he is and what he does and why he does it, even whenever he's calling himself Muslim doing things that aren't Islam, right? That's the irony of it. That's the power of secular liberalism. You can be a devout believer, but just don't make it the center of your life and don't make everything in your life governed by it because, that's a little bit too much, right? Yes, sir. Question.
Well, it's not a question, but it's related to this.
Okay, bismillah.
Remember that story you told us about that Imam guy? When are you a new Muslim in Egypt? And he said, I don't have to pray because I'm already at
No, this is not Egypt. This is written in some old book from a group of misguided Muslims. that one of the so-called enlightened guru saints told the community under him that I don't have to pray because he misinterpreted an ayah from the Quran according to his desires. It says, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينُ. I learned it in Egypt. That was the place where I learned it. So the verse says, worship your Lord or be devoted, serve him until you reach certainty, right? So he's saying, I've reached certainty. So he's telling his students, you need to be praying, and he doesn't pray. But if you met him, if you saw him, very long beard, very nice turban, flowing robe, inshallah, he was this peaceful, calm, I think a lot of it's an act, to be honest with you. I've seen it from a lot of different characters, right? And that's how he is talking. So that guy has invented a new religion, right? And he set up partners with Allah in that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ummati la tajtami'u ala ad-dalal, right? My nation, meaning the scholars of my nation, will never agree upon something that's misguided. And the Holy Quran said, وَمَنْ يُشَاقِقَ الرَّسُولَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ. The Quran said, whoever would break apart from the example of the Prophet and follow a way different than all of the other believers, then that person will find themselves in the hellfire, right? It's very serious for somebody to just cancel out the whole history of knowledge in the religion, right? And then they say, this is what I'm going to do, right? And they have no support whatsoever from any reference of scholarly respect. It's like, I had somebody come to me recently and they were saying, well, I understand that there was a law made a long time ago that Muslim women should not be marrying non-Muslim men, right? And she was saying, but that was back in the day when men were patriarchal. And I said, what do you mean back in the day? The Quran says, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. It's not a back in the day thing. God has instituted that there is a responsibility that a man be a leader of his household. That's in the Quran and it's in the Bible. And no Bible does not say this. It says it in every Bible, in every translation, in every version, right? That God has given the responsibility. Now, if some guy is a dictator and oppressor, that's his own sin and mistake in abusing the verse. But men were supposed to be leaders of the household. So for a Muslim man, I'm going to see a Christian or a Jewish wife if I chose to take that ayah, which I believe that there was a reason why that was ayah revealed in a circumstance, in a context, which I don't believe is here in America. But I would be seeing my wife as following a real prophet who taught real divine values. Now, I won't agree with her on the creed issues of disbelieving in Prophet Muhammad or thinking Jesus was the literal Son of God or God incarnate or something like that. But the general values and teachings that Jesus taught about how to live your life, or Moses, I'm going to believe that's from God. And so I'm going to agree with that. So if I'm the man of the house, and I'm Christian or Jew or whatever, and my wife is a Muslim, I'm going to see her as following a false prophet. She's following someone who is a false prophet, a liar, an immoral person, someone that should not be followed. That's the nature of the issue here. Well, now the issue is brought to me in a very rational, logical way, and I respect that, right? Well, Imam, but I've heard you in many khutbahs, you said X, Y, and Z, and it seems like you're modern or liberal or something like this. I said, everything I said was somehow said by a great scholar before me. I'm not mujtahid, it's not my business to invent my religion from nowhere, right? So we have a orthodoxy and a system, and there is scholarly checks and balances, right? Ijtihad is not a minor thing, it's a huge thing. And you don't just get there because you think so, right? You will be told that by a large number of people around you, right? And he's like, but Imam, my husband respects my religion. I said, I get that point, that's fine. But the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah that said, don't marry the polytheistic men until they become believers, that ayah was understood for anyone who's not Muslim. They may have used the term polytheist, but it means all of the understanding from Ahl Sunnah has always been for someone who's not a believer in Islam, right? And so that's where we realize that knowledge, you have to stick with what you know from the Quran and the Sunnah and what the scholars have said. And if so say I start hearing that Sheikh Qaradawi, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya or Sheikh so-and-so has issued fatwas that she can marry that guy. Now I can say, well, you know what, there's a fatwa from the Sheikh and you can do this, right? Now I have a basis from a mujtahid, from someone who has reached that level that everybody knows that Sheikh is of the top of the inheritors of the prophethood, right? So now that's how you stay within the mainstream and you do not open yourself to what would be a type of shirk. To allow, that's when the Prophet, okay, this goes back, I almost forgot this hadith. So the Jewish man who converted to Islam, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, you're saying that we Jews are mushrikun. And he says, yes, you were. And he says, well, how's that? We were always raised to believe that God is one and all of this. He said, did you allow the rabbis to randomly cancel out the Torah because of what they said? And he said, yes. He said, then you have associated them with God, right? Because without any well-known system of law, some of the rabbis have just decided over time that they're going to cancel this and do this and make it a standard, right? I always thought as a young man that Hanukkah is some holy religious thing. But whenever I was in Florida at a interfaith thing, and it was really weird because it was, back then, Ramadan was still closer to December, right? And so we were having this thing, and so first the rabbi went and he told the story about how the Jews, after this thing, and then they had the menorah, and then they invented the day of Hanukkah. And so then I was like, but so it's not in the Torah? He's like, no, we made it up. And I was like, really? You just made up your own holiday? And everybody, he said, yeah, we have lots of those. And then the pastor, Bishop Michel, he comes from Europe, he talked about how Christmas was invented and everything and all of this. So then I explained ours and I said, one of the things about our religion is that everything has to come through revelation. Human beings can't just invent religiosity. You can't just say that, And I felt very comfortable at it. I mean, I was always assuming that Hanukkah must have been taught by God in the Torah or something like this, but yeah, it's just something that people had made up. And so the Prophet ﷺ made a big deal about this, and some of our scholars said a quarter of our religion is hanging on the hadith that whoever would invent or introduce a newly taught practice of religion that is not something I taught or in the revelation, then that newly invented practice will be rejected, right? So that's something that makes our tradition very sacred and very well preserved and recognized for what it is. I think that about does it. Is there any questions? Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah reward you all for being patient. I went about 10 minutes.